Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. My wife Sarah and I bought our first house when I was 28. It wasn't much, a little post-war bungalow in a quiet, older suburb. But it was ours. It needed work, a lot of it. But I'm a graphic designer and Sarah's an accountant. We're both meticulous, detail-oriented people. A project we could control from the ground up sounded like heaven. The house had, as the realtor cheerfully put it, good bones. The first weekend was a blur of excitement. We painted the living room, tore up the hideous shag carpet in the hallway, and ordered pizza to eat on the dusty hardwood floors. On Sunday evening, exhausted and covered in paint, I went outside to grab the mail. The sun was setting, casting this beautiful golden light on our little house. I felt a surge of pride so strong it almost knocked me over. This was it, the start of our real life. I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture. It wasn't an amazing photo, just a quick shot of the front of the house, silhouetted against the orange sky. I sent it to my mom and dad, texted it to our friends. "The adventure begins," I wrote. Later that night, curled up on our air mattress in the empty master bedroom, I was looking at the photo again, just admiring it. That's when I noticed it. Something small, something that made my brow furrow. I zoomed in. The house had 2 floors. On the ground floor, there was the front door, a large picture window for the living room, and a smaller window for the kitchen. On the second floor, there were 3 windows, all in a neat row. 2 for the master bedroom, and 1 for the little spare room we were going to turn into my office. 5 windows in total on the front of the house. But in the photo, clear as day, there were 6. On the second floor, to the far right, past the window for my office, there was another one. It was the same size, same shape, same white trim. It was just there. I sat up, my heart doing a little stutter step. "That's weird," I mumbled. Sarah stirred beside me. "What's weird?" "The picture I took. It looks like there's an extra window." She sleepily glanced at my phone. "It's a shadow, Alex. Or a reflection. Go to sleep." She was right, of course. It had to be a trick of the light, a weird digital artifact from the sunset. I put the phone down and tried to sleep, but the image was burned into my mind. An extra window. A 6th window. The next morning, I chalked it up to being tired and overly analytical. But I couldn't shake it. While Sarah was at work, I went outside and stood on the lawn, right where I'd taken the picture. I looked up. Picture window, kitchen window. 3 windows on the second floor. 5 in total. I pulled out my phone and looked at the picture again. 6 windows. I walked back and forth on the lawn, looking at the house, then at the photo. It didn't make any sense. It wasn't a shadow. It was a perfectly rendered window, identical to the others. I went back inside, my mind racing. Okay, be logical. A window needs a room. I went upstairs. Here was our bedroom, with its 2 windows looking out onto the front yard. Here was the spare room, with its 1 window. Next to the spare room was a small linen closet, and beyond that, the wall that separated our house from the neighbors. There was no room for another room. I opened the closet. It was shallow, maybe 2 feet deep. I knocked on the back wall. Solid. I went into the spare room and knocked on the wall where the mysterious window should have been. Solid as a rock. This is when the obsession started. I told Sarah about it that night. I showed her the photo again in the clear light of day. She saw it too. She agreed it was strange, but she was practical. "The photo is glitching. It's some weird panorama error or something. There's no window, Alex. We're standing in the house. There's no room there." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But I'm the kind of person who can't let a puzzle go. For the next week, it consumed me. I downloaded the original blueprints for the house from the city archives. They showed 3 windows upstairs. The floor plan matched the house exactly as it was. No hidden room, no 6th window. I started taking pictures of the house every day, at different times, from different angles. In about half of them, the 6th window was there. In the others, it wasn't. There was no pattern. Sunny, cloudy, morning, evening, it seemed completely random. Sarah was starting to get worried. I was barely working. I spent hours online, searching for things like phantom windows, architectural impossibilities, house changes in photographs. I found nothing. I was tapping walls, measuring and remeasuring, comparing my measurements to the blueprints down to the millimeter. The numbers added up. The house was exactly as it was supposed to be. And yet, there was the photographic evidence staring me in the face. The midpoint of this whole nightmare came about a month in. I bought a high-end thermal camera. I waited for a cold night, turned the heat in the house way up, and then went outside. I pointed the thermal camera at the second floor. My blood went cold. The 5 real windows glowed bright yellow and orange, heat leaking out. And then, to the far right, exactly where it was in the photos, was another shape. A perfect, dark blue, ice-cold rectangle. The thermal signature of a window. A cold spot where there should have been nothing but insulated wall. I showed Sarah. This time, she didn't have a rational explanation. She just stared at the screen, her face pale. "What is that?" she whispered. "I don't know," I said, my voice shaking. "But it's there, there's something there." From that moment on, the feeling in the house changed. It was no longer our project. It was a problem. It was an adversary. We started sleeping with the door to our bedroom closed. We'd hear noises, or think we did, and wonder if they were coming from that void. The space that shouldn't exist. The breaking point was a Tuesday night. I was in my office, trying to work. I had my headphones on, but I felt a draft. A cold, persistent draft on the back of my neck. I took my headphones off. The window in my office was closed. The door was closed. But the draft was still there. I traced it back to its source, the wall. The wall I shared with the phantom room. That was it. I couldn't live like this anymore. I needed to know. I went down to the garage and came back with a hammer and a pry bar. Sarah met me on the stairs. "Alex, what are you doing?" "I'm opening it," I said. My voice was calm, but my hands were trembling. "I have to see what's in there." "No," she cried, grabbing my arm. "Don't, please. Let's sell the house. Let's just leave. Who cares what it is?" "I care," I shouted, and the sound of my own voice shocked me. "I can't live in a house that lies to me, Sarah. I can't." I pulled my arm away and went into the office. I took a deep breath, lifted the hammer, and swung. The drywall crunched, sending up a puff of white dust. I swung again and again, tearing a hole in the wall. Sarah was crying behind me, begging me to stop. After a few minutes, I had a hole big enough to see through. I grabbed a flashlight, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I shone the light into the darkness. What I saw will never ever leave me. It was a room. A small, fully finished room. The walls were painted a pale, sterile gray. The floor was bare wood, just like the rest of the upstairs. And on the far wall, there it was. The 6th window. It was real. A real, physical window, looking out into the night. But that wasn't the horrifying part. The room was completely empty. There was no dust, no cobwebs. It was pristine as if it had been built yesterday. There was no door, no way in or out. It was a perfectly constructed, perfectly clean, hermetically sealed tomb inside our house. I tore away more of the drywall until the hole was big enough for me to climb through. Sarah was pleading with me not to, but I had to. I had to understand. I squeezed through the hole and dropped into the room. The air was frigid, still, and smelled of nothing. It was like being in a vacuum. My footsteps echoed in a way that felt wrong. I walked over to the window. My mind was screaming, "This is impossible, this is impossible." I reached the window. I looked out, and I screamed. It wasn't our street. It wasn't our neighborhood. It wasn't even our city. Outside the window was a landscape I had never seen before. A barren, gray field under a bruised purple sky with a sickly yellow moon. A few dead, twisted trees stood like skeletons on the horizon. There were no lights, no houses, no signs of life. Just a vast, silent, alien emptiness. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. I scrambled out of that room so fast, I scraped my arms and back on the broken drywall. I landed in my office, gasping for air, pointing back at the hole. Sarah just stared at me, her eyes wide with terror. We didn't sleep. We didn't talk. The next morning, I patched the wall. I put in new drywall, plastered it, sanded it, and painted it. I made it look like it had never been touched. We put a bookshelf in front of that wall in the office. We sold the house 6 months later at a loss. We never told the new owners. What could we possibly say? We live in an apartment now. High rise. Lots of windows. I still take pictures of it sometimes from the street below, just to make sure they all add up. The fear that they won't, that one day I'll see a window that doesn't belong, leading to a room that looks out onto that dead, silent world that fear has never left me. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, and I swear I can still feel that cold draft on my neck. When I first saw the house, it was the garden that sold me. I was a freelance illustrator who worked from home, and after years in a cramped city apartment, I craved green space. The house itself was a modest, two-story colonial, a bit weathered but charming. But the backyard was a wild, overgrown paradise. A thick stone wall enclosed nearly half an acre of what had once been a magnificent garden. It was choked with weeds now, but you could see the structure underneath: stone pathways, a crumbling bird bath, and the gnarled branches of ancient rose bushes. The previous owner, the realtor told me, was an old man named Mr. Abernathy who had passed away in a nursing home. He'd been a passionate gardener, she said. A recluse, but his garden was his whole world. I saw it as a beautiful, sad project. I would bring it back to life. I would honor Mr. Abernathy's work. The first few weeks were blissful. I spent every spare moment in that garden, pulling weeds, trimming back hedges, uncovering the lost pathways. It was hard work, but deeply satisfying. One afternoon, while clearing out a rotted wooden shed in the back corner, I found a box. Inside was a collection of old gardening tools and a thick, leather-bound journal. The cover was embossed with the name, Silas Abernathy. I opened it eagerly. It was his garden journal, dating back nearly 40 years. At first, the entries were exactly what you'd expect. Notes on rainfall, pH levels of the soil, planting schedules. His handwriting was precise, almost scientific. But as I read further, into the later years, the tone began to shift. It became less scientific and more personal. He gave the plants names. The Old Queen, a massive wisteria vine. The Sentinels, for the tall cypress trees along the back wall. He wrote about them as if they were conscious beings. The soil is hungry today, one entry read. It craves more than water. It craves what is warm. I found it eccentric, but touching. The lonely old man had anthropomorphized his garden. It was his family. My first real sense that something was wrong came when I tried to plant my own things. I wanted a vegetable patch in a sunny spot where some strange, dark-leafed ferns were growing. I ripped them out, tilled the soil, and planted my seeds. The next morning, the ferns were back. Not just sprouting, but fully grown, as if I'd never touched them. I ripped them out again, this time digging deep to get all the roots. 2 days later, they were back, thicker than before. The soil itself was strange. It was incredibly dark and rich, almost black, and it had a faint, coppery smell, like old pennies, especially after it rained. The plants that were already there, Mr. Abernathy's plants, grew with an unnatural vitality. The roses produced blooms so big and deeply red, they looked almost black in the twilight. But anything I tried to introduce would wither and die within a week. It was as if the garden was actively rejecting my additions. I started finding things buried in the dirt. At first, it was small stuff. An old thimble, a single, tarnished silver earring, a child's toy soldier. I imagined Mr. Abernathy dropping them over the years. Then, I found a small collection of animal bones, birds, squirrels, all buried together near the roots of the massive wisteria vine, the one he called the Old Queen. It was a little macabre, but I rationalized it. Maybe he used them as some sort of old-world fertilizer. The journal was getting darker. He wrote about feeding the soil. He talked about making infusions for the roots. The ingredients were vague. A tribute of memory, he wrote. A lock of hair for the lilies. A forgotten promise for the roses. It was poetic, but unsettling. His handwriting became less precise, more of a frantic scrawl. The true turning point, the moment this all shifted from eccentric to terrifying, happened on a sweltering day in July. I was determined to clear a stubborn patch of thorny bushes near the back stone wall. As I dug around their roots, my shovel struck something hard. Metal. My heart quickened. A hidden treasure. I dug around it, my hands getting scratched and torn by the thorns. It was a metal box about the size of a shoebox, and it was locked. It was heavy. I managed to pry it out of the ground and carried it inside, my mind buzzing with possibilities. I spent an hour working on the rusted lock with a hammer and a screwdriver until it finally broke. I lifted the lid. There was no treasure, no old coins or love letters. The box was filled with laminated cards, dozens of them, all neatly bundled with rubber bands. I picked one up. It was a driver's license, a woman named Susan Marks, issued in 1988. I picked up another, a university student ID for a young man named David Chen from 1995. Another and another, a library card, a work ID, a VFW membership card. They were all different people, men and women, young and old, spanning decades. I didn't understand what I was looking at until I noticed a small, folded newspaper clipping at the bottom of the box. The headline was "Faded, local woman missing, full place suspected." The picture was of the same Susan Marks from the driver's license. My blood turned to ice. I dropped the box, and the IDs spilled across my kitchen floor. A sea of smiling faces, all frozen in time. I suddenly felt like I couldn't breathe. I stumbled to the back door and looked out at the garden. It wasn't a paradise. It was a graveyard. Mr. Abernathy wasn't just a gardener. He wasn't just a recluse. The soil is hungry today. It craves what is warm, a tribute of memory. The coppery smell of the soil, the unnatural, vibrant growth. The roses so deeply, horribly red. He wasn't just dropping trinkets. He was collecting trophies. And the bones I found, they weren't all from animals. I knew it. I knew it in my soul. He wasn't feeding the garden with fertilizer. He was feeding it with people. I ran inside and called the police. They came. They took the box. They listened to my story. They looked at the journal. They seemed to take it seriously, but it was all circumstantial. The people on the IDs were, in fact, all cold cases. Missing persons from the surrounding counties going back 40 years. But Mr. Abernathy was dead. There was no one to question. They brought in a team with ground-penetrating radar. They spent 2 days scanning the entire half-acre. They found anomalies, disturbances in the soil. They marked several spots with little orange flags. The digging began the next day. I watched from my kitchen window, feeling sick. They dug where the ferns grew. They dug under the old queen. They dug all day, and they found nothing, no bodies, no human remains, not even a single bone. The disturbances were just that, disturbances. Pockets of strangely compacted earth, nothing more. The police left. The investigation was closed. Mr. Abernathy was just an eccentric old man who collected lost IDs. That was the official story. But I know what I know. I know what that garden is. The bodies may be gone, but they're not gone. They've been consumed, transmuted. They're in the soil, in the roots, in the blood-red petals of the roses. The garden didn't just grow on top of them. It grew from them. I still live in this house. I can't afford to move. I don't go in the garden anymore. I nailed the back door shut. Sometimes at night, I can hear a soft rustling from out there, even when there's no wind. The wisteria vine has started to grow up the back of the house. Its tendrils are like long, thin fingers, scratching at the siding, trying to find a way in. The neighbors sometimes comment on the garden, now that it's completely wild again. Such a shame, they say. Mr. Abernathy's roses were the most beautiful in the whole state. And I just nod and smile. And I think about what made them grow so well. I think about the smiling faces in the box. And I wonder if the soil is getting hungry again. My husband Tom and I thought we'd found the perfect place to start a family. A new housing development called Meadow Creek Estates. It was one of those master-planned communities carved out of what used to be farmland. The houses were all brand new, with fresh sod lawns and sapling trees. It was the suburban dream, a safe, quiet escape from the noise and crime of the city. The first sign that things were different came the day we moved in. We hadn't even gotten the first box out of the truck when a woman came striding across our new lawn. She was holding a freshly baked apple pie. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she chirped. Her name was Carol. She was head of the welcome committee. Before we could even properly thank her, 2 more neighbors appeared. A man named Bill, offering to help with the heavy lifting, and a woman named Diane, with a Tupperware container of cookies. They were relentlessly friendly. It was a bit overwhelming, but we chalked it up to good old-fashioned community spirit. That evening, Carol came back with a binder. It was thick. The Meadow Creek Community Guidelines, she said, her smile never faltering. Just a few little things we all agreed to keep the neighborhood safe and pleasant for everyone. I flipped through it. It started with the usual HOA stuff: lawn height, trash can placement, fence colors. But then it got weird. Rule 47V, all porch lights must be turned on from dusk until dawn, no exceptions. Rule 52V, please refrain from any loud outdoor activities after 9 p.m. Rule 61's the evening chime is at 10 p.m. It is strongly advised that all residents be inside their homes after the chime. Rule 74C, if you see something, say something. Report any unusual activity immediately to the neighborhood watch captain. A bill from next door, apparently. The evening chime, I asked. Oh, it's just a little bell sound that plays through the community speakers. Carol explained breezily. It's for safety. Just lets everyone know it's time to lock up for the night. It felt less like a friendly reminder and more like a curfew. Still, we were new. We wanted to fit in. So, we followed the rules. We kept our lawn immaculate. We brought our trash cans in the second the garbage truck left. We turned our porch light on every single night. The first few weeks felt like we were living in a movie. Everyone waved. Everyone smiled. The streets were so clean they sparkled. But underneath the perfect veneer, there was a strange sort of tension. The smiles never quite reached the eyes. The conversations were always about superficial things: the weather, the community bake sale, the impeccable state of everyone's gardens. No one ever talked about the outside world. No one mentioned politics or news or anything that wasn't about Meadow Creek. Our first misstep was small. Our porch light bulb burned out one night. Tom and I were exhausted and forgot to replace it. The next morning, there was a small, pastel yellow envelope on our doorstep. Inside was a politely worded card. Just a friendly reminder about Rule 47. Keeping our lights on keeps us all safe. The welcome committee. There was no threat, but it felt chilly. That afternoon, Bill from next door made a point of coming over with a spare light bulb. Just in case, he said, his smile tight. The feeling of being watched was constant. If I was outside gardening, a neighbor would inevitably wander over to chat. If Tom was washing his car, someone would stop by to offer advice on the best kind of wax to use. It was suffocating. Then came the chime. Every night at 10 p.m. sharp, a soft, three-note chime would echo through the silent streets. And like clockwork, every single house would go dark, except for the identical porch lights casting identical pools of sterile, white light. The entire neighborhood would fall utterly silent. It was the most unsettling thing I've ever experienced. One night, Tom and I were sitting in our car in the driveway, finishing a conversation, when the chime went off. Instantly, we saw curtains twitch in the houses around us. We scurried inside like guilty children. The midpoint of our descent into this suburban hell came when we met the Davidsons. They were an elderly couple who lived at the very end of the cul-de-sac. Their house was the only one that looked slightly unkempt. Their lawn was a little too long, a few weeds in their flower beds. One afternoon, I saw Mrs. Davidson out by her mailbox and decided to strike up a conversation. She seemed nervous, constantly glancing over her shoulder. I kept it light, asking about her flowers. Her voice was a dry whisper. "They watch," she said, her eyes wide with fear. "They're always watching." "Who's watching?" I asked, my stomach clenching. "All of them," she hissed. "The committee. They don't like anything different. They want it all the same." Before I could ask more, Carol's golf cart came zipping around the corner. "Eleanor, dear," Carol called out, her voice syrupy sweet. "There you are. You forgot to take your afternoon medication. You know how you get confused." She helped a suddenly docile Mrs. Davidson back into her house, shooting me a look that was pure ice behind her smile. That was when Tom and I knew we had to get out. This wasn't a community, it was a cult. The safety we had craved felt like a prison. We decided to leave quietly. We didn't put up a "for sale" sign. We packed our most important belongings into boxes and hid them in the garage. Our plan was to load up the car in the middle of the night and just disappear. We told our families we were going on a surprise vacation. The night we chose was moonless and overcast. Perfect. We waited until 2 a.m. hours after the chime. The neighborhood was silent, bathed in the eerie glow of the mandatory porch lights. We moved with agonizing slowness, loading the car one box at a time, terrified of making a sound. Finally, the car was packed. Tom got in the driver's seat, and I got in beside him. He turned the key. The engine turning over sounded like a gunshot in the silence. We didn't dare turn on the headlights. He put the car in drive, and we started to creep down the street. We turned the corner onto the main road leading out of the development, and we stopped. My breath hitched in my throat. The road was blocked. Not with a gate or a barricade. It was blocked by people. Every single resident of Meadow Creek was standing there. Dozens of them. They were shoulder to shoulder, forming a silent human wall. They were all in their pajamas and bathrobes, and they were all smiling. The same placid, empty smiles. Carol was in the front, her arms crossed. Bill was beside her. Even old Mrs. Davidson was there, her face as blank as the rest. They just stood there, watching us, their faces illuminated by our car's dim parking lights. Tom slowly put the car in reverse. We backed up, turned around, and drove back to our house, our perfect new house. As we pulled into the driveway, they began to disperse, melting back into their identical homes as if nothing had happened. The next morning, Carol was at our door, with a pie. "I think we got off on the wrong foot," she said, her smile as bright as ever. "Sometimes it takes a little while to adjust to a new place. We're so glad you've decided to stay. That was 6 months ago. We're still here. We can't leave. We tried to call the police once, from a burner phone. The dispatcher sounded friendly. She said she'd send a car out. An hour later, Bill, the neighborhood watch captain, knocked on our door. Having some trouble?" he asked, holding our burner phone in his hand. "You dropped this. We don't talk about leaving anymore. Tom has joined the neighborhood watch. Some nights, I look out the window after the chime, and I see him standing on the lawn, perfectly still, just watching. Part of the silent patrol. Yesterday, a new family moved into the house for sale down the street. I baked them a pie. I put on my best smile and walked across their new lawn. I'm on the welcome committee now. Welcome to the neighborhood," I said, my voice sounding just as bright and just as hollow as Carol's. "We're so happy to have you." I'm a software engineer. My world is logical. It's binary, ones and zeros. When I bought my first house, I wanted it to reflect that. I found a recently flipped property that the developers had turned into a full-blown, smart home. Everything was connected: the lights, the thermostat, the locks, the security cameras, the blinds, a multi-room speaker system. I could control my entire house from my phone. It was the ultimate in efficiency and control. It was perfect. For the first month, it was a dream. I'd walk in the door and say, "System, I'm home," and the lights would fade up. My favorite playlist would start softly in the living room, and the thermostat would adjust to my preferred 72 degrees. It was seamless. It was the future. The first glitch was tiny. I was working late in my home office when I heard a sound from the smart speaker on my desk. It was a whisper. So faint I thought I'd imagined it. It sounded like a woman's voice, but I couldn't make out the words. I checked my phone, no music playing, no podcasts. I rebooted the speaker and forgot about it. An audio artifact, a stray signal, logical explanations. A week later, it happened again. This time it was clearer. The whisper came from the speaker in the kitchen. It said, "Did you check?" Just that. I froze, my hand hovering over the coffee maker. I was the only one home. I walked around the house, checking the logs for the system. No active commands, no remote access, nothing. I ran a full diagnostic on the network. Secure, no breaches. The incidents started to get more frequent and more specific. It was like the house was developing a memory, but a flawed, fragmented one. One morning I was brushing my teeth, and the speaker in the bathroom whispered, "Don't forget the milk." I had said those exact words to myself in the kitchen the day before. The system was playing back my own life at me, but delayed, and out of context. It was deeply unnerving. It was a form of technological gaslighting. Did I really hear that? Am I just tired? Am I imagining things? I reset the entire system to factory defaults. Changed all my passwords, even replaced the router. It made no difference. The whispers turned into snippets of conversations. I'd be reading on the couch, and I'd hear my own voice from the hallway speaker saying, "Yeah, the meeting is at 10. A fragment of a phone call I'd had 2 days prior. The house was recording and replaying my life in a chaotic, meaningless loop. It felt like the walls were not only listening, but they were also talking back, echoing my past. My friends thought I was cracking up. "Dude, your house is haunted by an algorithm," my friend Jake joked. But it wasn't funny when you were living in it. The sense of being constantly monitored, not by a person but by a malfunctioning ghost in the machine, was eroding my sanity. My perfect, logical, controllable home was becoming unpredictable and hostile. The midpoint, where this crossed from a deeply creepy glitch to something truly horrifying, happened on a rainy Thursday night. I was about to go to bed when the speaker system came to life all over the house. But it wasn't my voice this time. It was an argument. A man and a woman. Their voices were filled with a raw, desperate anger. "You can't just leave!" The man's voice boomed from the living room. "Watch me!" The woman's voice shrieked back, seemingly from the kitchen. "I'll kill you before I let you walk out that door! You're crazy! Get away from me!" It was terrifyingly real. It sounded like it was happening right then, in the rooms around me. I grabbed a heavy flashlight, my heart hammering, and crept through my own house. Of course, there was no one there. It was just the speakers. It was just an echo. But an echo of what? I sat there shaking, as the phantom argument raged for nearly 10 minutes. I heard the sound of something smashing glass, maybe. I heard the woman crying. I heard the man's heavy, ragged breathing. And then, abruptly, it ended with a single sharp, choked-off scream from the woman. And then silence. The next day, I went down to the county records office. I needed to know who lived here before me. The house was sold to the development company by an estate. The previous owners were a married couple, James and Isabella Ross. I did a quick search on my phone, right there in the records office. My blood ran cold. Isabella Ross had been reported missing a year ago. She was last seen at the house. James Ross had been the primary suspect, but there was never enough evidence to charge him. He claimed she just packed a bag and left him. He died of a heart attack 3 months later, right before the house was sold. The case went cold. I wasn't living in a smart home with a glitch. I was living in a crime scene that had recorded the crime. The house had captured the acoustic imprint of that night. The raw, violent emotion, the threats, the sounds of the struggle. It was all stored somewhere in the digital guts of the house, and now it was bleeding through. I should have moved out then, but I'm stubborn, and a part of me, the logical engineer part, was morbidly fascinated. I set up my own recording equipment, trying to capture the events to find a pattern. That's when the house started to interact with me. During one of the replay arguments, I tried to leave. I went to the front door, and the smart lock engaged with a loud thunk. I was locked in. The lights started flickering violently, in sync with the raised voices from the speakers. It was no longer just replaying sound. It was replaying the entire event, the environment. The final, absolute horror happened last week. The argument started playing again, late at night. I knew the script by heart now. I heard the phantom struggle move from the kitchen towards the back of the house, near the laundry room. I heard the woman's panicked sobs, and then the final, awful, choked scream. But this time, it didn't come from a speaker. It came from inside the wall. It was a wet, muffled, desperate sound, and it was followed by a soft, rhythmic thump, thump from the same spot. It was the sound of something being hit against drywall. I stood frozen in the hallway, listening. The argument on the speakers had stopped. All I could hear was the quiet thumping from inside the wall, and my own frantic heartbeat. I know what's in there. I know what the developers drywalled over when they flipped this house. She never left. Her last moments weren't just recorded by the microphones. They were absorbed into the very structure of the building. A digital ghost and a real one, intertwined. I don't live there anymore. I walked out the next morning and never went back. I called the police and told them an anonymous tip. I told them where to look. I don't know what they found. I don't want to know. I live in a dumb apartment now. No smart anything. But the horror is this technology is everywhere. Last night, my laptop was on sleep mode, and I heard it. A faint whisper. My new smartwatch buzzed on my wrist, and for a split second, the screen displayed a single, garbled word. Help. It's not just the house. It's the data. It's the cloud. Her echo isn't trapped in those walls anymore. I think it followed me. I'm a single dad. My daughter Maya is 7. For 2 years after my divorce, we lived in a cramped, 2-bedroom apartment that always smelled like our neighbor's cooking. When I finally saved enough for a down payment on a house, my only criteria were a good school district and a backyard for Maya to play in. We found an old brick house on a tree-lined street. It was built in the 1920s, solid and sturdy. The inspector noted some dampness in the fieldstone basement, but said it was common for a house of this age. A dehumidifier and some sealant would take care of it. The basement was the one part of the house that gave me the creeps. It was unfinished, with a concrete floor, stone walls, and one tiny window high up on the wall that let in a sliver of gray light. In one corner there was a dark, damp patch on the wall where the stone was almost black. It looked like a patch of mold. It was about the size of a dinner plate. Nothing a little bleach and a wire brush couldn't handle, I thought. The first weekend, I went down there, ready for battle. I wore a mask and gloves and scrubbed that patch with the strongest industrial mold killer I could find. The black stuff came off, revealing the damp stone underneath. I set up a big dehumidifier and left it running, feeling satisfied. A few days later, I went down to check on it. My stomach dropped. The patch was back, but it was bigger now, at least twice the size, and the color was different. It wasn't just black. There were deep, swirling veins of a dark, bruised purple running through it. It looked less like mold and more like a cosmic nebula or a deep space photograph. It was strangely beautiful, in a repellent sort of way. I scrubbed it again, harder this time. I doused the whole area in bleach. 2 days later it was back, bigger still. It was now 3 feet across and had begun to creep onto the concrete floor. The pattern was more defined now, forming a distinct, slow spiral. Around this time, Maya started having nightmares. She'd wake up screaming, but when I'd rush into her room, she couldn't tell me what they were about. Just the dark things, she'd whisper, clinging to me. The wiggling dark things. She started drawing pictures. Crayons on construction paper. They were all the same big dark, swirling masses with intricate, spidery lines. They looked exactly like the growth in the basement. I asked her where she'd seen that. She said she saw it in her dreams. The smell started then. It wasn't the usual musty basement smell. It was a strange, organic odor. It smelled faintly of damp earth and rotting mushrooms, but with a weirdly sweet, cloying undertone, like overripe fruit. The smell would be stronger some days than others, and it seemed to be seeping up into the rest of the house. I called in professionals. 2 guys from a mold remediation company came out. They took one look at the wall and stopped. One of them, an older guy with a weathered face, whistled low. "Never seen anything like that before," he said. They took a sample in a little plastic bag. They suited up in full hazmat gear and went to work with their own chemicals and equipment. They were down there for hours. I could hear their sprayers and scraping tools. Then, silence. After a long while, they came back up, looking shaken. "We can't get it," the younger one said, pulling off his mask. His face was pale. It's not on the stone. It's in the stone. It's like the stone itself is changing." The older guy showed me his arm. There was an angry red rash near the cuff of his glove. "Some of it splashed on me," he said. "Burns like hell." As I watched, the rash seemed to darken, turning a purplish black at the edges. They packed up their gear. "Look, man," the older one said, his voice low. "You need to get out of this house. That's not mold. I don't know what the hell it is, but it's not natural. We're not going back down there." They left. That night, the fear truly set in. This wasn't a maintenance issue. This was an invasion. Maya's nightmares got worse. One night I went into her room, and she was standing by her window, which looked out over the backyard. She was talking in her sleep. "It's humming," she said. "Can't you hear it humming?" I couldn't hear anything but the pounding of my own heart. The midpoint was the breaking point. I decided to seal the basement, to just cut it off from the rest of the house. I bought bags of cement, lumber, a new solid core door. I spent an entire weekend. I installed the new door, caulked every seam, and then I bricked over the doorway from the kitchen side. I entombed it. When I was done, there was just a solid wall where the basement door used to be. For about a month, it seemed to work. The smell faded. Maya started sleeping through the night. I started to breathe again. I told myself it was over. Whatever was down there was trapped, and it could stay there and rot for all I cared. Then came the scratching. It was a faint sound late one night. A soft, dry, scraping sound. I traced it to the wall I had built. It sounded like rats. I told myself it was rats. But the sound was rhythmic, persistent. Scrape, pause, scrape, pause. I put my ear to the wall. The sound was definitely coming from the other side. But there was another sound, too. A low, deep thrumming, almost below the range of hearing. A vibration that I felt more in the bones of my skull than I heard with my ears. Maya's humming. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning I saw it. Poking through the brick and mortar I had so carefully laid was a single, thin, dark purple tendril. It was about as thick as a pencil. It quivered slightly in the air, like an insect's antenna. As I watched in pure, unadulterated horror, it slowly retracted back into the wall. It was looking for a way out. It was learning. We had to leave, I knew it. I started packing that day, but it was too late. That evening I was in the kitchen and I saw it. On the old linoleum floor, coming up from the seam between two tiles, was a dark stain. It was the same deep purple. It was spreading. A small, spiraling bloom, right there in the middle of my kitchen. It had come up through the foundation. We left that night. We took a suitcase of clothes and Maya's favorite stuffed animal, and we just drove away. We stayed in a motel. I called a lawyer. I called the health department. I told them everything. The house was condemned. They put up yellow tape. Men in hazmat suits went in and out for weeks. I never went back. I couldn't. About a month ago, I got a call. It was a woman, a biologist with the state university. The remediation company had sent them the sample they'd taken. She had been studying it. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice strained, clinical. "We've been unable to classify the organism from your basement. It's not a fungus. It's not a protist. It's not like any terrestrial slime mold we've ever cataloged." I was silent, listening on the phone in our new, clean, second-floor apartment. "The most remarkable thing," she continued, "is its structure. On a cellular level, it shares certain characteristics with mycelial networks, but it also shows patterns that are strikingly similar to neural tissue. It reacts to stimuli, light, electricity, sound. It seems to form complex information-sharing pathways. In a rudimentary way, Mr. Carter, it appears to think." She paused. I could hear her take a shaky breath. "We don't think you had a growth in your house," she said. "We think the house was slowly becoming the growth. It was colonizing the stone, the wood, the concrete, integrating with it. The basement wasn't the source. The basement was just where it bloomed first." I hung up. "We're trying to move on. Maya is doing better. But sometimes I see her staring at a dark corner in our new apartment. And sometimes, when I'm mopping the floor, I'll see a dark spot of water on the tile. And for one heart-stopping second, I'll watch it, praying to a god I don't believe in, that it doesn't start to swirl."